On a freezing night in Salt Lake City, a former Navy SEAL named Caleb Hart thinks the world has finally stopped asking anything from him. Snow hisses under his boots, his left knee stings with every step, and he just wants to get home. Then a German shepherd steps into the streetlight and blocks the path. No barking, no panic, just amber eyes that don't blink. The dog turns, looks back, and leads Caleb behind an abandoned strip mall, straight into a place that smells like bleach and fear. Caleb hears something that shouldn't be there. A child's breathing, barely holding on. And before the night is over, a dark SUV starts hunting the same dog that brought him there, and the name Kessler slips out like a warning. What Caleb finds next will expose a cruelty hiding in plain sight, and force him to choose between catching a powerful man or saving the ones who can't run. If you feel that tension already, share this story with someone who needs hope. Comment what you think the dog was trying to tell Caleb, and subscribe for more powerful truth. The dog who wouldn't bark. Snow drifted sideways through the streetlights, thin as ash. Salt Lake City held its breath under a hard winter sky, and every step on the sidewalk sounded louder than it should. Caleb Hart walked like a man who had learned to save his energy for the moments that mattered. He was around 40, tall and broad-shouldered, built solid even with the tiredness that clung to him the way cold clung to metal. His left knee never let him forget old damage, so his stride had a slight stiffness, a careful economy. People noticed it sometimes and then looked away, as if limps were private things. He wore the same winter layers every night. A navy coat that fell to mid-thigh, a red and black plaid flannel beneath it, faded jeans, and brown leather boots worn soft at the creases. It was the outfit of a man who didn't dress to impress, only to endure. A neatly trimmed beard framed an angular face, square jaw set as if it had been tightened in another life. At his temples, a few gray strands caught the streetlight. His dark brown eyes looked warm when he let them. Tonight, they were mostly quiet. He was finishing a late shift near the dry docks and warehouses on the city's edge, the kind of work that kept the rent paid and left him alone. That was the point. After the teams, after hospitals and paperwork, and the long echo of things he never talked about, alone felt like control. The wind shoved at his coat. He tugged the collar up and kept going. Then the dog stepped into his path. A German shepherd, black along the back with tan legs and a tan mask that made his expression look permanently thoughtful. His ears stood upright, cutting the wind. His amber-brown eyes locked on Caleb's like they already knew each other. Caleb stopped without meaning to. Not because the dog was big, not because he looked dangerous, because he looked deliberate. The shepherd didn't yip or whine or circle. He didn't do the nervous dance of a stray begging for scraps. He simply stood there and waited. Caleb exhaled, a cloud that vanished at once. "He lost, buddy?" The dog didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Caleb had seen fear in animals before. He'd seen rage. This wasn't either. This was intent. He glanced around. No owner in sight, no leash trailing, no car door open. Only the empty street, a shuttered convenience store, and the snow painting everything in thin white strokes. The dog shifted his weight once, then turned his head to the right, toward a darker side street that ran behind a line of aging strip malls. He took 3 steps away, stopped, and looked back. It was the oldest gesture in the world. "Follow me." Caleb almost laughed. The kind of short, surprised sound that comes out when the world behaves like a fable. "You've got to be kidding!" The dog waited, patient as a clock. Caleb had a rule: don't chase trouble. Trouble was sticky. Trouble multiplied. Trouble turned into paperwork and sleepless nights and headlines. But there was another rule buried deeper, older than any rule he'd made for survival. Don't ignore a call for help, even if it comes without words. He took a step. The dog took a step. Caleb took another. The dog turned and began to walk, not rushing, not looking over his shoulder every second. Confident, like he'd already decided Caleb was coming. Caleb's knee protested on the uneven curb cut as they crossed into the side street. He tightened his jaw, the muscle along it hardening. The shepherd kept a steady pace, the tips of his ears flicking at every sound. He moved with discipline that didn't belong to a stray. Service dog, Caleb thought, and the thought landed with strange certainty. Not because of any visible gear, there wasn't any, but because of the dog's composure. The way he read the world. The way he didn't waste motion. Caleb followed him behind the abandoned strip mall, where the lights were fewer and the wind funneled through narrow gaps like a hand trying to pry doors open. The buildings back here looked tired. Dumpster lids clattered faintly, a nervous percussion. The dog slowed near a chain-link fence with a gap cut into it, clean and recent. He slipped through without hesitation and looked back again. Caleb stared at the opening. The snow around it was scuffed with footprints, heavy boots, not paws. He crouched, testing his knee, and his senses sharpened the way they used to. He smelled something that didn't belong in clean winter air. Bleach. Not fresh laundry bleach, the harsh, angry kind used to erase. His eyes tracked the ground. More scuffs. Drag marks. A few dark stains that the snow had tried to hide. The dog stood still, watching Caleb, and for the first time, Caleb noticed a thin old scar along the shepherd's muzzle, pale against tan fur. Not recent. Healed long ago. Like a chapter that had ended, but left a line behind. "All right," Caleb murmured, mostly to himself. "I see you." He slipped through the fence. Behind the mall, the world was a maze of delivery doors, broken pallets, and service corridors. A forgotten space where people went when they didn't want to be seen. The shepherd led him to a recessed loading bay, half-shadowed, protected from the snow. Caleb stopped a few yards back. He listened. Nothing at first. Only the distant hum of traffic and the rattle of a loose sign. Then, faintly, a metallic scrape, like something being shifted across concrete. The shepherd's ears angled forward. He did not bark. He did not growl. He only held his posture, a living question. Caleb's heartbeat slowed into that cold focus he hated and trusted at the same time. His hands flexed inside his gloves. He scanned the angles, the door, the corners, the dark gap between two dumpsters. He kept his weight balanced to spare his left knee, the old injury arguing with the newer necessity. The smell of bleach was stronger here. Under it was something else. Animal musk, damp fabric, and a sour note of fear that made the back of Caleb's throat tighten. He lowered his voice. "You want me to see something?" The shepherd looked at him once, steady and sure, then turned his gaze to the loading bay door. From inside, a sound came again. Not metal this time. A small, thin sound. Like breathing that didn't have much air left to give. Caleb held still, and in that hush, the city's winter felt suddenly less like weather and more like a warning. The gym bag. Snow pressed itself into every crack behind the abandoned mall. Wind slid through the loading bays like a thief. The cold made even small sounds feel sharp, like they could cut. Caleb Hart did not rush the door. He stood a few yards back, shoulders squared inside his navy winter coat, the red and black flannel peeking at the collar where the wind kept trying to get in. His boots were planted wide for balance, because his left knee was already warning him not to be brave for free. In the dim light, his face looked carved from angles and fatigue, beard neatly trimmed, a few gray strands catching the glow. His dark brown eyes narrowed, warm only when he allowed it. Right now they were exact. Beside him, the German shepherd held still. Ranger's ears were up, tracking the space the way a professional tracks it. No barking, no growling, just alertness, controlled and quiet. The dog's presence didn't feel like a stray's luck. It felt like training. Like a service dog who had learned that noise was wasted unless it saved a life. Caleb listened again. There. That thin sound. A breath that did not want to be heard. He moved in. Every step was measured. His knee complained, but he kept his weight even. He checked the corners, the shadows, the spots where a man could hide, and the spots where a man could fall. He had lived in places where a doorway was never just a doorway. You either respected that, or you paid. The loading bay door was partly open, just enough to promise trouble. Caleb slid closer, one hand raised as a quiet signal to Ranger. Not because Ranger needed it, but because Caleb needed the habit. The dog stayed at his heel, a steady anchor. Inside, the air was warmer by a fraction, which made the smell worse. Bleach, heavy and fresh. Under it, sweat, damp fabric, and something animal. Caleb's throat tightened. His mind tried to name what he was feeling and failed. Anger, maybe, but anger was too simple. This was the older thing. The thing that wakes up when a strong person notices someone small has been treated like nothing. His boot nudged a strip of torn cardboard. There were scuff marks on the concrete, as if something had been dragged. And then he saw it. A gym bag. Gray, scuffed, cheap. The zipper was half open. One handle was frayed, like it had been yanked hard. It sat near the wall in a way that made Caleb's instincts flare. People left bags behind all the time. They did not leave them here. Not in a place that smelled like someone had tried to erase a story. Ranger took one step forward, then froze. His amber-brown eyes fixed on the bag. Not curious, not playful. Focused. Almost protective. Caleb's pulse slowed. He crouched, careful on his knee, and reached for the zipper. A small hand shot out. Caleb didn't flinch, but the muscles in his shoulders tensed anyway. The hand was thin, fingers trembling. A child's hand. He opened the bag wider. A little girl stared up at him, eyes huge and dark with fear, face pale from cold and shock. Her hair was brown and tangled, stuck to her forehead as if she'd been sweating under panic. She looked about 8, too small to carry the weight already sitting in her posture, shoulders hunched like she'd learned to disappear. She did not scream. She did not cry loud. She only breathed fast, trying to keep the sound inside her chest. Caleb felt something in him crack and then hold, like ice under a boot that almost breaks but doesn't. He softened his voice. "Hey, you're okay. You're okay." The girl's gaze flicked past him, toward the darkness behind the bay, like she expected someone to step out and punish her for being seen. Caleb angled his body, placing himself between her and the door without making it obvious. It was a protective reflex, older than thought. He kept his hands visible. He let her see he wasn't rushing her. "What's your name?" he asked. Her lips parted. No sound came. Her eyes darted to Ranger, And something changed. Not comfort, not relief, but a fraction of trust. The dog was calm. The dog was not afraid of Caleb. That mattered. "Mia," she whispered at last, voice thin as paper. "Mia Bennett." "Okay, Mia," Caleb said. He nodded once, like a promise. "I'm Caleb, and that's Ranger. You're not in trouble." Ranger lowered his head slightly, not pressing in, not crowding, just close enough for Mia to feel him there. His ears stayed forward, listening to the building, listening to the world. Mia's breath caught. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back, like she'd made a deal with herself never to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Caleb's jaw tightened. The anger in him finally found its shape. Not a roaring anger, a cold, controlled one. The kind that made him careful, not reckless. He slid his arms under Mia with steady strength and lifted her out of the bag as if she were fragile glass. She weighed less than she should. She clung to his coat, fingers digging into the navy fabric, and he felt the tremor running through her. "Can you walk?" he asked. Mia nodded quickly, too quickly, like she would say yes to anything if it meant leaving. Caleb guided her toward the fence gap. Ranger moved ahead, scanning, then paused and looked back, waiting for the pair of them like a sentinel. Outside, the wind slapped Mia's cheeks. Caleb pulled his coat open a little to wrap her in the warmer pocket of air near his chest. His flannel brushed her face. She flinched at first, then leaned closer, as if the simple smell of fabric and cold and a human heartbeat was proof that this was real. Caleb took out his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen. Calling for help should have been simple, but the bleach smell said someone had tried to clean fast. The boot prints said more than one person. The carefulness of the bag said planning, and if planning was involved, then so was confidence. Caleb stared at the snowy street beyond the mall. He remembered how systems could fail, how the wrong person could answer a call, how information could travel faster than sirens. He made himself breathe once. Then he dialed. When the dispatcher answered, Caleb kept his voice calm and clipped, giving only what he had to. A child, cold, found behind the abandoned strip mall on Redwood Road. Immediate medical attention. He did not say the word bleach. He did not say drag marks. He did not say someone is nearby. Not yet. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Mia looked up at him. "They'll come?" "They'll come," Caleb said. Ranger's head lifted. His body went still in a different way. Not relaxed. Ready. Caleb followed the dog's gaze. Down the side street, beyond the snow and the shadows, headlights appeared. Slow. Careful. Not the bright hurry of an ambulance. A dark SUV rolled toward them, like it already knew where to look. Caleb's mouth went dry. His eyes hardened, the warmth disappearing behind something sharper. He shifted Mia behind him, and Ranger, silent as ever, stepped forward, the scar behind the eyes. Snow kept falling, slower now, as if the sky had grown tired of throwing itself at the city. The streets gleamed under thin ice, and every red light felt too long when you were trying not to be seen. Caleb Hart did not run. Running was loud. Running was panic. Panic made mistakes, and mistakes got people hurt. He moved Mia down the side street with his body angled between her and the dark SUV. His navy winter coat flared with each step, the red and black flannel visible when the wind snapped the front open. His left knee complained with every change in pace, a sharp reminder that the past always cashed its checks. He ignored it anyway. Ranger stayed close, silent as a shadow. The German shepherd's ears were high, listening for the smallest shift in tire noise, the smallest change in breathing. When the SUV slowed, Ranger didn't bark. He did something better. He guided. A quick look over his shoulder, then a turn into a narrow corridor between buildings. A service dog's decision. Efficient. Certain. Caleb followed without asking. He didn't have to. He trusted that kind of certainty because it was the same certainty he had once been trained to live by. The corridor led to an alley lined with dumpsters and frozen puddles. Caleb spotted a gap in a wooden fence and pushed it open. The hinges squealed, and he hated the sound, but there was no time for perfect. He slipped Mia through, then followed, keeping his face blank, his breathing controlled. Behind them, the SUV rolled past the alley mouth, headlights sweeping like searchlights. It did not stop. Not yet. Caleb's pulse stayed steady. Inside, something colder than fear settled into place. He wasn't thinking about himself. He was thinking about the child's small hand gripping his coat. About the dog who had chosen him. About the people who believed a gym bag was an acceptable place to store a human being. Ranger moved ahead, guiding them through a back path that spilled onto a better-lit street near a small urgent care clinic. The building was plain, the kind of place that stayed open because the night always needed somewhere to bleed into. Inside, the heat hit them like a wall. Mia swayed, eyes glassy. Caleb steadied her with one hand, then shrugged off his navy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The coat swallowed her, and for a moment she looked even smaller. His flannel shirt, red and black, worn soft, was suddenly exposed to the cold air at the doorway. He didn't care. Warmth belonged to the child. Ranger paced once, then sat, head up, watchful. Still no barking. The nurse at the counter looked up. She was in her early 30s, with light brown hair pulled into a practical ponytail, a few loose strands escaping around her cheeks. Her scrubs were a muted blue under a pale jacket, and her tired eyes had the sharpness of someone who had seen enough fear to recognize it instantly. She didn't panic. She didn't freeze. She moved like a person who decided quickly. "I'm Hannah Pierce," she said, voice calm, professional. "What happened?" Caleb kept his words clipped. "Found her behind an abandoned strip mall. She's cold and in shock." Hannah's gaze flicked to Mia, then to Caleb's face. She read the set of his jaw, the controlled stillness in his posture, the way he stood slightly off his left leg. Her eyes softened without losing focus. "Okay," she said. "Bring her back. Now." As they moved down the hall, Hannah glanced at Ranger. The dog met her eyes, steady. Hannah didn't reach for him, didn't try to pet him. She just nodded, like she understood boundaries. "Is he yours?" she asked quietly. Caleb hesitated. Words around the dog felt complicated. "He found me." Hannah's mouth twitched, the faintest hint of humor cutting through the tension. "That's usually how it works, isn't it?" In the exam room, Mia perched on the bed like she was afraid the mattress might swallow her. Hannah wrapped her in a heated blanket, checked her pulse, her pupils, the color of her lips. Her hands were gentle but efficient. Mia flinched at the first touch, then forced herself still, like she'd learned obedience as survival. Caleb stood near the door, arms crossed, trying not to loom, trying not to look like a threat. He watched Mia's face. He watched how her eyes kept drifting to the doorway, to the corners, to the shadowed spaces where danger liked to live. Hannah followed his gaze. "She's been scared for a while," she said softly, as if naming it could take some of its weight. Mia's voice came out thin. I didn't I didn't make noise. Caleb felt his chest tighten. You did good, he said, and hated how small the sentence sounded compared to what it meant. You did what you had to. Hannah stepped out to arrange further care and call the right people. Caleb didn't miss the way she avoided saying police out loud in front of Mia. She was smart. She understood that certain words could reopen panic. When Hannah returned, a doctor followed behind her. Dr. Elaine Foster looked around 40, with dark hair cut short and neat, a pair of thin-framed glasses perched low on her nose. She carried herself with calm authority, the kind that didn't need volume to be obeyed. Her eyes took in Mia, then Caleb, then Ranger in the corner with his head high. Elaine Foster, she introduced herself. We'll take care of her. She's hypothermic, mild, but she's stable. We need to keep her warm and monitor. Mia's shoulders loosened by a fraction. Not trust, not yet, but a crack in the armor. Caleb nodded once. Thank you. Hannah lingered by the door after the doctor left. You said you found her behind a strip mall, she said. What were you doing there? Caleb's eyes moved to Ranger. The shepherd sat as still as a statue, but something in him looked distant, like he was listening to a memory. He led me, Caleb said. Hannah studied the dog again, then Caleb. He's trained, she said, more statement than question. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. Hannah understood anyway. A few minutes later, when Mia finally closed her eyes under the heated blanket, Caleb stepped into the hallway with Ranger. The clinic was quieter here, the hum of fluorescent lights steady overhead. Ranger stood, ears forward, and pulled gently toward the exit. Caleb's stomach sank. No, he murmured. Not back there. Ranger looked up at him, eyes steady. And Caleb saw it clearly now. This wasn't curiosity. This was unfinished business. Against his better judgment, Caleb followed. They didn't return to the loading bay. Ranger led him to the side of the strip mall, to a service path half buried in snow. The dog's steps slowed as they approached a small stand of scrub trees that grew crooked against the fence line, branches bare and black against the white. Ranger stopped. The air felt different here, still heavy, as if the place was holding on to something it refused to release. Caleb's breath fogged in front of him, and he hated how quiet his own heart became. He saw it then. Not a fresh horror, not a scene of gore. Something older, a mark left behind. A length of frayed rope, weathered by time, tied high on a branch, and beneath it, pressed into the snow, an old depression where something had once been, where the winter had tried and failed to erase the shape of loss. Caleb's throat tightened. He didn't have to imagine the full picture to understand it. Ranger didn't whine. He didn't bark. He stood perfectly still, staring at the rope like it was a grave marker. Caleb felt rage rise, hot and sudden, then clamp down under discipline. He knelt slowly, pain flaring in his knee, and rested a hand near Ranger's shoulder without grabbing, without claiming, just presence. I'm sorry, he said, voice low. Ranger's ears flicked. His eyes stayed on the branch. In that moment, Caleb understood something that made the world tilt. Ranger hadn't just found Mia. Ranger had brought Caleb back to the place where Ranger had once learned what humans could do when nobody was watching. And now, he was asking Caleb to make it end. A door slammed somewhere nearby. A distant engine turned over. Caleb rose, every muscle tightening. His eyes went sharp, scanning the fence line. Ranger's head snapped toward the sound. Mia was safe inside for now. But the night was not finished. And whatever had rolled past them in that dark SUV, it had not been an accident. A trap in the snow. The storm eased into a steady, patient fall. Snow filled the air like quiet dust, softening the city's edges. In the calmer weather, footsteps sounded clearer, which meant lies had fewer places to hide. Caleb Hart watched the parking lot through the urgent care's glass doors, counting seconds the way he used to count breaths. His navy coat hung open enough to show the red and black flannel beneath. The cold made his left knee ache like a warning light, but he stayed planted anyway, boots firm on the mat. Ranger sat at his side, still and alert, a service dog in everything but paperwork. No noise, no fuss. Just a steady gaze that tracked headlights, drifting figures, and the spaces between them. Caleb had met men who talked big and missed the obvious. Ranger missed nothing. Inside, Mia slept under a heated blanket in a back room. Hannah Pierce checked on her every few minutes with the quiet care of someone who knew that fear could wake up hungry. Hannah's ponytail had loosened a bit, strands of light brown hair falling near her cheeks. Her face held that tired, determined kindness common to night workers, the kind that did not ask permission to help. She stepped beside Caleb and followed his stare into the dark lot. "You look like you're waiting for a bad decision to walk up and introduce itself." Caleb kept his voice low. "It already did." Hannah's eyes flicked to Ranger. "And he chose you," she said, like she was still trying to understand that part. Caleb glanced down at the shepherd. Ranger's scarred muzzle was motionless, ears tipped forward. "Feels like he's the one in charge." Hannah huffed a small laugh. "That's the most honest thing you've said all night." The humor was light, but it didn't break the tension. It only kept it from crushing them. Caleb turned from the door. "I need to ask her something when she wakes, not here in the hallway." Hannah nodded. "Exam room 2 is empty. I'll make it look normal." When Mia finally stirred, her eyes opened fast, scanning the corners before her mind fully returned. Caleb sat in the chair across from her, not too close, hands relaxed on his knees. He kept his posture calm, even though his body wanted to stand between her and the whole world. Ranger lay near the door, head up, listening. Mia's gaze landed on the dog first. Her breath slowed a little. Then she looked at Caleb's face, his square jaw, his neatly trimmed beard, those dark eyes that tried to be gentle. "You're still here," she whispered. "I said I would be," Caleb replied. Hannah brought a cup of warm water and placed it on the tray like a peace offering. She spoke softly, careful. "Sweetheart, you're safe right now. But we need to understand what happened so we can keep you safe tomorrow, too." Mia's fingers curled in the blanket. "They said I wasn't supposed to talk." Caleb nodded once. "You don't have to tell everything. Just one thing. A name you heard." Mia's eyes darted to the door, as if the name could leak through walls. "Kessler," she said. "They said Kessler wants it clean. No mess." The word landed in Caleb like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of possibility spread fast. A name meant a person. A person meant patterns. Patterns meant mistakes. Hannah's brows lifted. "Kessler as in Trent Kessler?" Caleb looked at her. "You know the name." "Everyone knows the name," Hannah said. "He's on billboards, charity events, rescue fundraisers. He smiles with puppies for cameras." Caleb's mouth tightened. He had met that kind of man before. The kind who put goodness on like a jacket and took it off when nobody could see. Hannah leaned toward Mia, voice warm. "Did you see him?" Mia shook her head quickly. "No, I heard it. They were angry, like they messed up." Caleb's focus sharpened. "Did you hear anything else?" Mia swallowed. "They said a man with a dog was there. They said, 'Find the dog.'" Hannah's face went still. Ranger lifted his head a fraction higher, ears forward, like he understood the sentence, even without the words. Caleb's chest tightened, not with fear for himself, but with a clear, cold sense of what this meant. Ranger wasn't just a witness. Ranger was a target. Caleb stood and stepped into the hallway with Hannah, keeping his voice low. "We keep her here tonight. Locked doors. No names on any board. No social worker parade." Hannah's jaw set. "Already done. And before you ask, I don't post my nights on Instagram." Caleb exhaled something close to a laugh. Good. He moved toward the nurse's station and borrowed a computer with Hannah watching the hall. He pulled up local news clips and charity photos, searching faces the way he had once searched rooftops. Trent Kessler appeared again and again in polished images. Suit sharp, smile smooth, eyes that looked like they were always calculating the next angle. Caleb copies the name, then scanned public pages for addresses tied to rescue operations. He noted warehouse rentals, donation drop-offs, volunteer schedules. He didn't need illegal access. Most people handed away their secrets for free, wrapped in polite language. Ranger rose and walked to the glass door. He froze. Caleb followed his line of sight. A man stood across the street under a streetlight, pretending to check his phone. Tall and thin, shoulders hunched against the cold. His face was half hidden by a raised collar, but Caleb saw the posture of someone who was waiting, not wandering. The man looked up for a second, and Caleb caught the flicker in his eyes. Quick, sharp, predatory. Ranger did not bark. He simply stiffened. Hannah appeared at Caleb's side. "Friend of yours?" "No," Caleb said. The man slipped into motion, crossing toward the clinic with slow confidence. Caleb's instincts moved first. He guided Hannah backward with a small hand signal. "Take Mia to the back, now." Hannah didn't argue. She pivoted and disappeared down the hall, her steps fast but controlled. The man reached the curb and paused, as if measuring the door. Caleb stepped outside, leaving the warmth behind. The cold hit his face like a slap. His navy coat flared, flannel visible, boots planted. His left knee throbbed as he shifted weight, but his stance stayed solid. The stranger stopped a few feet away and offered a smile that did not touch his eyes. Caleb studied him under the light. Mid-30s, narrow face, a restless twitch in the jaw. Dark hair tucked under a beanie, hands hidden in pockets. The kind of man who wanted you to forget you'd seen him. "Nice dog," the man said, voice casual. Caleb's eyes went hard. "He's working." The man's smile faltered. "Working what?" Caleb did not answer. He watched the man's shoulders, the angle of his hips, the weight on his feet. He saw the readiness to bolt or to lunge. He smelled faint cigarette smoke and cheap cologne. Ranger stepped forward half a pace and stopped. Silent warning. The man's gaze dipped to the shepherd, then back to Caleb. Something like recognition flashed there, then was smothered. A car door closed somewhere behind the clinic. Another engine idled. Caleb felt the trap forming. Not around him, around Ranger. He took one slow step forward, closing distance. Walk away. The man's eyes narrowed. You don't know who you're dealing with. Caleb's voice stayed flat. I know exactly what you are. The man's phone buzzed. He glanced down at it and swallowed. The confidence cracked for a heartbeat. Then he backed away, fast. Too fast. This ain't over, he muttered, and turned into the falling snow. Caleb did not chase. Chasing was what they wanted. He looked down at Ranger. The dog's eyes stayed on the street where the man had gone, amber and unblinking. Inside the clinic, Hannah locked the door and came back to the glass, her face pale but steady. Caleb's phone vibrated in his pocket, an unknown number. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Somewhere in the city, a man like Trent Kessler was hearing that the cleanup had failed again. And this time, the order would be simpler. Find the dog. The door left open. Morning arrived without warmth. The sky was the color of steel, and fresh snow lay over the city like a clean sheet pulled tight to hide yesterday's stains. Caleb Hart stood in the clinic's narrow break room, staring at a paper cup of coffee he hadn't touched. The navy winter coat hung from a chair, still damp at the hem. Beneath it, his red and black flannel looked almost too ordinary for the night it had witnessed. His left knee ached with a deep, stubborn throb, the kind that reminded him how long healing could take when a man refused to stop moving. Ranger sat by the door, head up, ears angled toward every sound in the hallway. Quiet, watchful, a service dog in everything but the label. Hannah Pierce entered with a tablet tucked under her arm. Her hair was still in its ponytail, but her eyes carried the grit of someone who had stayed awake on purpose. She looked at Caleb, then at Ranger. They tried calling twice, she said. A volunteer coordinator asking if we had a lost shepherd in the building. Caleb's jaw tightened. Too fast. Hannah nodded. So you're right. Someone's watching the front desk. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had spent years learning what it felt like when a perimeter got tight. The sensation wasn't fear. It was pressure, like the air itself was leaning in. Mia slept in a back room. When she woke, she didn't cry for home. She asked if the dog was still there. Caleb checked on her quietly. She was smaller under the blanket than any child should be, cheeks still pale, but her eyes were clearer. The terror hadn't vanished. It had only stepped back. You safe? Caleb asked. Mia nodded, then looked past him. They'll come back. Caleb crouched so his face wasn't towering. His knee protested, sharp as a needle, but he stayed there anyway. Not if I do this right. Mia's mouth trembled. What if they take him? Caleb felt the question land in his ribs. He had been asked by grown men what would happen if the enemy got the upper hand. He had been asked by commanders, by doctors, by his own nightmares. But being asked by a child about a dog who didn't bark scraped something raw. They won't, he said, steady. Not today. He stood and stepped into the hall. Ranger rose with him, matching his pace like they shared a heartbeat. Caleb had already made his decision in the quiet hours before dawn. He would not rush a hero fantasy. He would not storm a building and hope courage was enough. He would build a clean line from evidence to cuffs, so the truth couldn't wriggle away in court or in the headlines. He needed one person in uniform he could trust. Hannah had given him a name last night, Deputy Mark Doyle. Doyle arrived before noon, alone, in a patrol car that didn't use its siren. He came in with his hat in his hands, shoulders thick under his jacket, face weathered by long shifts and too many messy calls. A small scar cut through his chin like an old punctuation mark. His eyes looked tired, but honest. Caleb met him near the back entrance, where the cameras were fewer. "Your heart," Doyle said, voice low. Caleb nodded once. "You're the one Hannah trusts." Doyle's gaze flicked to Ranger. "That dog yours?" Caleb didn't lie. "He chose me." Doyle exhaled through his nose like he wanted to laugh but didn't have the spare breath. "Figures. All right, tell me what you've got." Caleb laid it out with the precision of someone used to briefings. What he smelled, what he saw, where Mia was found, the SUV, the volunteer call, Mia's word, Kessler. He kept it tight. No drama, just the bones. Doyle's face darkened. "Trent Kessler's got friends," he said. "The kind with money. The kind who make problems disappear." Caleb's eyes hardened. "That's why we don't make a problem. We make a case." Doyle studied him for a beat, then nodded slowly. "Okay. We do it your way. Quiet. Documented." Caleb had done enough public searching to find a warehouse rental tied to one of Kessler's donation partners. It wasn't proof by itself, but it was a place to start watching, and watching was where truth got sloppy. That night, Caleb and Doyle sat in separate vehicles across from the warehouse, the kind of building that could hold anything and admit nothing. Snow drifted across the lot in slow ribbons. The world was silent except for the distant hum of heat units. Ranger lay in the back seat of Caleb's truck, head lifted, eyes on the warehouse doors. A black SUV pulled in. Caleb's muscles tightened. Not fear, recognition. Same shape, same cautious roll. The kind of vehicle that thought it was invisible because it was common. Two men stepped out, moving with practiced ease. One was tall and thin, collar high, hands in pockets, the watcher from the clinic. Under the lot lights, his narrow face looked sharper, his jaw twitching with nervous energy. He scanned the darkness, like he expected it to bite. Leon Varga, Caleb thought, remembering the way Hannah had described the rumors. Not a name she said out loud, just a description of a man who did errands. Then the second man emerged. Trent Kessler was taller than his photos suggested, shoulders squared in a tailored dark coat that sat perfectly on him. His hair was neat, his face clean-shaven, his smile ready even when there was nobody to charm. The kind of man who looked like he belonged on a stage, not in a snowy warehouse lot at midnight. Caleb watched through the windshield, breath slow. Ranger's ears lifted. Kessler spoke to Varga, then looked around the lot, eyes sliding over the dark vehicles without stopping. For a moment, Caleb understood why people lost to men like him. Kessler didn't look dangerous. He looked reasonable, like he could explain anything away. A side door opened. From inside, muffled barking rose, brief, then silenced. Caleb's hands clenched around the steering wheel. He remembered Ranger staring at a frayed rope. He remembered Mia in the gym bag. He remembered how quickly the world tried to clean itself when someone bled. Doyle's voice crackled softly through Caleb's phone. "We wait for a confirm, not just suspicion." Caleb forced his grip to loosen. Waiting felt like betrayal, but he knew the difference between vengeance and justice. Vengeance was loud and messy. Justice was careful, and it lasted. A delivery van arrived. A man pushed a cart toward the side door, metal cages covered with tarps. It wasn't dramatic. It was business. Doyle's voice came again, tighter. "That's enough." He called it in to the team he trusted, small, chosen, not broadcast. No sirens, no show. Kessler turned as if he sensed the shift. His smile vanished. He said something sharp to Varga. Varga moved fast, reaching toward the truck, toward something under the tarp. Ranger's body tensed in the back seat, silent, ready. Caleb made his choice in a heartbeat, not to chase Kessler's ego, to save what could be saved. He opened his door and stepped into the snow, navy coat snapping, flannel bright under the lot lights like a warning stripe. His boots crunched forward, knee flaring with pain, but he kept his pace controlled. "Kessler!" Caleb called, voice steady. Kessler looked over, eyes narrowing. For a half-second, he looked surprised. Then he recovered, face smoothing into that polished expression. "Who are you?" Kessler asked, voice calm as if this was a networking event. Caleb didn't answer. He kept walking. He watched Varga's hands. Varga lunged toward Ranger's truck door. Caleb moved faster, putting his body between Varga and the vehicle. He didn't swing wildly. He didn't explode. He controlled the space, caught Varga's arm, twisted just enough to stop the reach. Varga cursed, jerking like a trapped animal. Ranger stayed silent, but his eyes were locked on Varga with a clear message. One more step. Kessler backed away, scanning for exits. That was when Deputy Doyle's car rolled in, lights off until the last second, and then red and blue lit the snow like sudden fire. 2 more units followed, tight and purposeful. Doyle stepped out, posture firm. "Trent Kessler, hands where I can see them." Kessler froze, then lifted his hands slowly, still trying to look offended. "This is a misunderstanding." Doyle's voice didn't change. "We'll let the evidence speak." Officers moved to the side door, pulling back tarps, documenting cages, radios murmuring with clipped codes. Inside the warehouse, the sound of frightened animals rose, then softened as people moved in carefully. Caleb held Varga until cuffs clicked. Varga's face was pale, eyes wild. "You don't get it," he hissed. "He'll—" Caleb leaned close, voice low. "I get it. That's why it ends." Kessler watched it all with a face that tried to stay smooth, but his eyes kept flicking to Ranger. Not hatred, calculation, like he was already planning another story. Caleb stepped toward him. "You used them," Caleb said, quiet enough that only Kessler heard. "You used the helpless because you thought no one would notice." Kessler's smile returned, thin. People notice what they're told to notice. Caleb's eyes went colder. Not tonight. Later, after statements and forms and the long, slow unspooling of a secret, Caleb returned to the clinic with Ranger. Dawn was coming again, pale and clean, as if the sky wanted to pretend the night had been a dream. Mia was awake, sitting up, clutching the edge of the blanket. When she saw Ranger, her shoulders dropped like she'd been holding them up for days. "He's okay?" she asked. Caleb nodded. He sat on the edge of the chair, careful with his knee, and let the quiet fill the space. Mia reached out, hesitated, then placed her small hand on Ranger's head. The dog leaned into it gently, eyes half closing. A sound slipped from Mia, half laugh, half sob. For the first time, it wasn't silent. Hannah stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching with a tired smile that held relief. Doyle lingered behind her, hat in his hands again, as if he didn't know where to put himself in a moment that soft. "What happens now?" Mia whispered. Caleb looked at the child, then at the dog, then at the morning light. "I don't know all of it," he admitted. Honesty was the one thing he still trusted. But I know this: you won't be alone, and he won't be left behind. He rose, went to the clinic door, and opened it. Cold air rushed in, sharp and real. Ranger stood, ears up, looking out at the snow like it was an old battlefield and a new beginning at the same time. Caleb held the door open longer than necessary, because some doors were meant to stay open. Sometimes a miracle does not arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes quietly, on a cold night, through a loyal dog who refuses to leave a suffering soul behind. Caleb thought his best days of purpose were buried in the past. But God has a way of placing the right life in front of the right heart. One silent German shepherd and one frightened little girl became a reminder that mercy is not an idea. It is a choice we make when it would be easier to keep walking. In everyday life, the world will still feel busy, cold, and unfair at times. But faith is built in small moments. A hand reaching out, a door held open, a voice that says, "You are safe now." If you are watching this today, let it be a gentle nudge. Pay attention to the quiet signs. Be kind when no one is clapping. Protect the vulnerable, even when it costs you comfort. That is where God often hides his miracles. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories like this. May God bless you and your family, keep you safe, and fill your days with peace.